Would the hour never pass? And when the hour ended, then she would walk out of this room. And I would do what? I could introduce myself. Hello, my name is Edward Cullen. May I walk you to your next class? She would say yes. It would be the polite thing to do. Even already fearing me, as I suspected she did, she would follow convention and walk beside me. It should be easy enough to lead her in the wrong direction. A spur of the forest reached out like a finger to touch the back corner of the parking lot. I could tell her I'd forgotten a book in my car. Would anyone notice that I was the last person she'd been seen with? It was raining, as usual. 2 dark raincoats heading the wrong direction wouldn't pique too much interest, or give me away. Except that I was not the only student who was aware of her today, though no one was as blisteringly aware as I was. Mike Newton, in particular, was conscious of every shift in her weight as she fidgeted in her chair. She was uncomfortable so close to me, just as anyone would be, just as I'd expected before her scent had destroyed all charitable concern. Mike Newton would notice if she left the classroom with me. If I could last an hour, could I last 2? I flinched at the pain of the burning. She would go home to an empty house. Police Chief Swan worked a full day. I knew his house, as I knew every house in the tiny town. His home was nestled right up against thick woods, with no close neighbors. Even if she had time to scream, which she would not, there would be no one to hear. That would be the responsible way to deal with this. I'd gone 7 decades without human blood. If I held my breath, I could last 2 hours. And when I had her alone, there would be no chance of anyone else getting hurt. And no reason to rush through the experience, the monster in my head agreed. It was sophistry to think that by saving the 19 humans in this room with effort and patience, I would be less a monster when I killed this innocent girl. 2008 Stephanie Meyer, 15. 16. Though I hated her, I knew my hatred was unjust. I knew that what I really hated was myself. And I would hate us both so much more when she was dead. I made it through the hour in this way, imagining the best ways to kill her. I tried to avoid imagining the actual act. That might be too much for me. I might lose this battle and end up killing everyone in sight. So I planned strategy, and nothing more. It carried me through the hour. Once, toward the very end, she peeked up at me through the fluid wall of her hair. I could feel the unjustified hatred burning out of me as I met her gaze, see the reflection of it in her frightened eyes. Blood painted her cheek before she could hide in her hair again, and I was nearly undone. But the bell rang. Saved by the bell, how cliché. We were both saved. She, saved from death. I, saved for just a short time from being the nightmarish creature I feared and loathed. I didn't walk as slowly as I should as I darted from the room. If anyone had been looking at me, they might have suspected that there was something not right about the way I moved. No one was paying attention to me. All human thoughts still swirled around the girl who was condemned to die in little more than an hour's time. I hid in my car. I didn't like to think of myself having to hide. How cowardly that sounded. But it was unquestionably the case now. I didn't have enough discipline left to be around humans now. Focusing so much of my efforts on not killing one of them left me no resources to resist the others. What a waste that would be. If I were to give in to the monster, I might as well make it worth the defeat. I played a CD of music that usually calmed me, but it did little for me now. No, what helped most now was the cool, wet, clean air that drifted with the light rain through my open windows. Though I could remember the scent of Bella Swan's blood with perfect clarity, inhaling the clean air was like washing out the inside of my body from its infection. I was sane again. I could think again. And I could fight again. I could fight against what I didn't want to be. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. I didn't have to go to her home. I didn't have to kill her. Obviously. I was a rational, thinking creature, and I had a choice. There was always a choice. It hadn't felt that way in the classroom. But I was away from her now. Perhaps, if I avoided her very, very carefully, there was no need for my life to change. I had things ordered the way I liked them now. Why should I let some aggravating and delicious nobody ruin that? I didn't have to disappoint my father. I didn't have to cause my mother stress. Worry. Pain. Yes, it would hurt my adopted mother, too. And Esme was so gentle, so tender and soft. Causing someone like Esme pain was truly inexcusable. How ironic that ID wanted to protect this human girl from the paltry, toothless threat of Jessica Stanley's snide thoughts. I was the last person who would ever stand as a protector for Isabella Swan. She would never need protection from anything more than she needed it from me. Where was Alice? I suddenly wondered. Hadn't she seen me killing the Swan girl in a multitude of ways? Why hadn't she come to help to stop me or help me clean up the evidence, whichever? Was she so absorbed with watching for trouble with Jasper that she missed this much more horrific possibility? Was I stronger than I thought? Would I really not have done anything to the girl? No. I knew that wasn't true. Alice must be concentrating on Jasper very hard. I searched in the direction I knew she would be, in the small building used for English classes. It did not take me long to locate her familiar voice. And I was right. Her every thought was turned to Jasper, watching his small choices with minute scrutiny. I wished I could ask her advice, but at the same time, I was glad she didn't know what I was capable of. That she was unaware of the massacre I had considered in the last hour. I felt a new burn through my body, the burn of shame. I didn't want any of them to know. If I could avoid Bella Swan, if I could manage not to kill her even as I thought that, the monster writhed and gnashed his teeth in frustration, then no one would have to know. If I could keep away from her scent. 2008 Stephanie Meyer, 17. 18. There was no reason why I shouldn't try, at least. Make a good choice. Try to be what Carlyle thought I was. The last hour of school was almost over. I decided to put my new plan into action at once. Better than sitting here in the parking lot where she might pass me and ruin my attempt. Again, I felt the unjust hatred for the girl. I hated that she had this unconscious power over me. That she could make me be something I reviled. I walked swiftly, a little too swiftly, but there were no witnesses across the tiny campus to the office. There was no reason for Bella Swan to cross paths with me. She would be avoided like the plague she was. The office was empty except for the secretary, the one I wanted to see. She didn't notice my silent entrance. Mrs. Cope. The woman with the unnaturally red hair looked up and her eyes widened. It always caught them off guard, the little markers they didn't understand, no matter how many times they'd seen one of us before. Oh, she gasped, a little flustered. She smoothed her shirt. Silly, she thought to herself. He's almost young enough to be my son. Too young to think of that way. Hello, Edward. What can I do for you? Her eyelashes fluttered behind her thick glasses. Uncomfortable. But I knew how to be charming when I wanted to be. It was easy, since I was able to know instantly how any tone or gesture was taken. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze as if I were staring deeply into her depthless, small brown eyes. Her thoughts were already in a flutter. This should be simple. I was wondering if you could help me with my schedule. I said in the soft voice I reserved for not scaring humans. I heard the tempo of her heart increase. Of course. Edward. How can I help? Too young, she chanted to herself. Wrong, of course. I was older than her grandfather. But according to my driver's license, she was right. I was wondering if I could move from my biology class to a senior-level science. Physics, perhaps. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. Is there a problem with Mr. Banner? Edward, not at all, it's just that I've already studied this material, in that accelerated school you all went to in Alaska, right? Her thin lips pursed, as she considered this. They should all be in college. I've heard the teachers complain. Perfect 4.0s, never a hesitation with a response, never a wrong answer on a test, like they've found some way to cheat in every subject. Mr. Varner would rather believe that anyone was cheating than think a student was smarter than him. I'll bet their mother tutors them. Actually, Edward, physics is pretty much full right now. Mr. Banner hates to have more than 25 students in a class. I wouldn't be any trouble, of course not. Not a perfect Cullen, I know that. Edward. But there just aren't enough seats as it is. Could I drop the class, then? I could use the period for independent study, drop biology. His mouth fell open. That's crazy. How hard is it to sit through a subject you already know? There must be a problem with Mr. Banner. I wonder if I should talk to Bob about it. You won't have enough credits to graduate, I'll catch up next year, maybe you should talk to your parents about that. The door opened behind me, but whoever it was did not think of me, so I ignored the arrival and concentrated on Mrs. Cope. I leaned slightly closer, and held my eyes a little wider. This would work better if they were gold instead of black. The blackness frightened people. As it should. Please, Mrs. Cope. I made my voice as smooth and compelling as it could be, and it could be considerably compelling. Isn't there some other section I could switch to? I am sure there has to be an open slot somewhere. 6th hour biology can be the only option. I smiled at her, careful not to flash my teeth so widely that it would scare her, letting the expression soften my face. Her heart drummed faster. Too young, she reminded herself frantically. Well, maybe I could talk to Mr. Banner. I could see if, 2008 Stephanie Meyer. 19. 20. A second was all it took to change everything, the atmosphere in the room, my mission here. The reason I leaned toward the red-haired woman. What had been for one purpose before was now for another. A second was all it took for Samantha Wells to open the door and place a signed tardy slip in the basket by the door, and hurry out again, in a rush to be away from school. A second was all it took for the sudden gust of wind through the open door to crash into me. A second was all it took for me to realize why that first person through the door had not interrupted me with her thoughts. I turned, though I did not need to make sure. I turned slowly, fighting to control the muscles that rebelled against me. Bella Swan stood with her back pressed to the wall beside the door, a piece of paper clutched in her hands. Her eyes were even wider than usual as she took in my ferocious, inhuman glare. The smell of her blood saturated every particle of air in the tiny, hot room. My throat burst into flames. The monster glared back at me from the mirror of her eyes again, a mask of evil. My hand hesitated in the air above the counter. I would not have to look back in order to reach across it and slam Mrs. Cope's head into her desk with enough force to kill her. 2 lives, rather than 20. A trade. The monster waited anxiously, hungrily, for me to do it. But there was always a choice, there had to be. I cut off the motion of my lungs, and fixed Carlyle's face in front of my eyes. I turned back to face Mrs. Cope, and heard her internal surprise at the change in my expression. She shrank away from me, but her fear did not form into coherent words. Using all the control I'd mastered in my decades of self-denial, I made my voice even and smooth. There was just enough air left in my lungs to speak once more, rushing through the words. Never mind, then. I can see that it's impossible. Thank you so much for your help. I spun and launched myself from the room, trying not to feel the warm-blooded heat of the girl's body as I passed within inches of it. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. I didn't stop until I was in my car, moving too fast the entire way there. Most of the humans had cleared out already, so there weren't a lot of witnesses. I heard a sophomore, DJ Garrett, notice, and then disregard. Where did Cullen come from? It was like he just came out of thin air. There I go, with the imagination again. Mom always says. When I slid into my Volvo, the others were already there. I tried to control my breathing, but I was gasping at the fresh air like I'd been suffocated. Edward, Alice asked, alarm in her voice. I just shook my head at her. What the hell happened to you? Emmett demanded, distracted, for the moment, from the fact that Jasper was not in the mood for his rematch. Instead of answering, I threw the car into reverse. I had to get out of this lot, before Bella Swan could follow me here, too. My own person demon, haunting me. I swung the car around and accelerated. I hit 40 before I was on the road. On the road. I hit 70 before I made the corner. Without looking, I knew that Emmett, Rosalie and Jasper had all turned to stare at Alice. She shrugged. She didn't see what had passed, only what was coming. She looked ahead for me now. We both processed what she saw in her head, and we were both surprised. You leaving? She whispered. The others stared at me now. Am I hissed through my teeth. She saw it then, as my resolve wavered and another choice spun my future in a darker direction. Oh, Bella Swan, dead. My eyes, glowing crimson with fresh blood. The search that would follow. The careful time we would wait before it was safe for us to pull out and start again. Oh, she said again. The picture grew more specific. I saw the inside of Chief Swan's house for the first time, saw Bella in a small kitchen with the yellow cupboards, her back to me as I stalked her from the shadows. Let the scent pull me toward her. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. 21. 22. Stop, I groaned. Not able to bear more. Sorry, she whispered, her eyes wide. The monster rejoiced. And the vision in her head shifted again. An empty highway at night. The trees, beside it coated in snow, flashing by at almost 200 miles per hour. I'll miss you. She said. No matter how short a time you gone. Emmett and Rosalie exchanged an apprehensive glance. We were almost to the turn-off onto the long drive that led to our home. Drop us here, Alice instructed. You should tell Carlyle yourself, I nodded, and the car squealed to a sudden stop. Emmett, Rosalie and Jasper got out in silence. They would make Alice explain when I was gone. Alice touched my shoulder. You will do the right thing. She murmured. Not a vision this time in order. She's Charlie Swan's only family. It would kill him, too, yes, I said, agreeing only with the last part. She slid out to join the others. Her eyebrows pulling together in anxiety. They melted into woods, out of sight before I could turn the car around. I accelerated back toward town, and I knew the visions in Alice's head would be flashing from dark to bright like a strobe light. As I sped back to Forks doing 90. I wasn't sure where I was going. To say goodbye to my father. Or to embrace the monster inside me. The road flew away beneath my tires. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. 2. Open book. I leaned back against the soft snow bank, letting the dry powder reshape itself around my weight. My skin had cooled to match the air around me, and the tiny pieces of ice felt like velvet under my skin. The sky above me was clear, brilliant with stars, glowing blue in some places, yellow in others. The stars created majestic, swirling shapes against the black universe, an awesome sight. Exquisitely beautiful. Or rather, it should have been exquisite. Would have been, if I'd been able to really see it. It wasn't getting any better. 6 days had passed, 6 days I'd hidden here in the empty Denali wilderness, but I was no closer to freedom than I had been since the first moment that I'd caught her scent. When I stared up at the jeweled sky, it was as if there were an obstruction between my eyes and their beauty. The obstruction was a face. Just an unremarkable human face, but I didn't quite seem to banish it from my mind. I heard the approaching thoughts before I heard the footsteps that accompanied them. The sound of movement was only a faint whisper against the powder. I was not surprised that Tanya had followed me here. I knew she'd been mulling over this coming conversation for the last few days, putting it off until she was sure of exactly what she wanted to say. She sprang into sight about 60 yards away, leaping onto the tip of an outcropping of black rock and balancing there on the balls of her bare feet. Tanya's skin was silver in the starlight, and her long blonde curls shone pale, almost pink with their strawberry tint. Her amber eyes glinted as she spied me, half buried in the snow, and her full lips stretched slowly into a smile. Exquisite. If I'd really been able to see her. I sighed. She crouched down on the point of the stone, her fingertips touching the rock, her body coiled. Cannonball, she thought. 2008 Stephanie Meyer, 23. 24. She launched herself into the air, her shape became a dark, twisting shadow as she spun gracefully between me and the stars. She curled herself into a ball just as she struck the piled snow bank beside me. A blizzard of snow flew up around me. The stars went black and I was buried deep in the feathery ice crystals. I sighed again, but didn't move to unearth myself. The blackness under the snow neither hurt nor improved the view. I still saw the same face. Edward. Then snow was flying again as Tanya swiftly disinterred me. She brushed the powder from my unmoving face. Not quite meeting my eyes. Sorry, she murmured. It was a joke, I know. It was funny. Her mouth twisted down. Irina and Kate said I should leave you alone. They think I am annoying you. Not at all. I assured her. On the contrary. I am the one who's being rude, abominably rude. I am very sorry. You going home, aren't you, she thought. I haven't entirely decided that yet. But you not staying here. Her thought was wistful now, sad. No. It doesn't seem to be helping. She grimaced. That's my fault, isn't it? Of course not. I lied smoothly. Don T. Be a gentleman. I smiled. I make you uncomfortable, she accused. No, she raised one eyebrow, her expression so disbelieving that I had to laugh. One short laugh, followed by another sigh. All right. I admitted. A little bit. She sighed, too, and put her chin in her hands. Her thoughts were chagrined. 2008 Stephanie Meyer, you re 1,000 times lovelier than the stars. Tanya. Of course, you re already well aware of that. Don T. Let my stubbornness undermine your confidence. I chuckled at the unlikeliness of that. I am not used to rejection. She grumbled, her lower lip pushing out into an attractive pout. Certainly not. I agreed, trying with little success to block out her thoughts as she fleetingly sifted through memories of her thousands of successful conquests. Mostly Tanya preferred human men. They were much more populous for one thing, with the added advantage of being soft and warm. And always eager, definitely. Succubus, I teased, hoping to interrupt the images flickering in her head. She grinned, flashing her teeth. The original, unlike Carlyle. Tanya and her sisters had discovered their consciences slowly. In the end, it was their fondness for human men that turned the sisters against the slaughter. Now the men they loved lived, when you showed up here. Tanya said slowly. I thought that I'd known what she'd thought. And I should have guessed that she would have felt that way. But I hadn't been at my best for analytical thinking in that moment. You thought that I'd changed my mind, yes, she scowled. I feel horrible for toying with your expectations. Tanya. I didn't mean to IWASNT thinking. It's just that I left in quite a hurry. I don't suppose you'd tell me why. I sat up and wrapped my arms around my legs, curling defensively. I don't want to talk about it, Tanya. Irina and Kate were very good at this life they decommitted to. Better, in some ways, than even Carlyle. Despite the insanely close proximity they allowed themselves with those who should be and once were their prey, they did not make mistakes. I was too ashamed to admit my weakness to Tanya. Woman troubles. She guessed, ignoring my reluctance. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. 25. 26. I laughed a bleak laugh. Not the way you mean it. She was quiet then. I listened to her thoughts as she ran through different guesses. Tried to decipher the meaning of my words. You re not even close. I told her. One hint. She asked. Please let it go. Tanya. She was quiet again, still speculating. I ignored her, trying in vain to appreciate the stars. She gave up after a silent moment, and her thoughts pursued a new direction. Where will you go, Edward, if you leave? Back to Carlisle. I don't think so. I whispered. Where would I go? I could not think of one place on the entire planet that held any interest for me. There was nothing I wanted to see or do. Because, no matter where I went, I would not be going to anywhere. I would only be running from. I hated that. When had I become such a coward? Tanya threw her slender arm around my shoulders. I stiffened, but did not flinch out from under her touch. She meant it as nothing more than friendly comfort. Mostly, I think that you will go back, she said, her voice taking on just a hint of her long-lost Russian accent. No matter what it is, or who it is. That is haunting you. You'll face it head on. You re the type. Her thoughts were as certain as her words. I tried to embrace the vision of myself that she carried in her head. The one who faced things head on. It was pleasant to think of myself that way again. I'd never doubted my courage, my ability to face difficulty, before that horrible hour in a high school biology class such a short time ago. I kissed her cheek, pulling back swiftly when she twisted her face toward mine, her lips already puckered. She smiled ruefully at my quickness. Thank you, Tanya. I needed to hear that. Her thoughts turned petulant. You re-welcome. I guess. I wish you would be more reasonable about things. Edward, I am sorry. Tanya. You know you re too good for me. I just haven't found what I am looking for yet. 2008 Stephanie Meyer. Well, if you leave before I see you again, goodbye. Edward, goodbye. Tanya. As I said the words, I could see it. I could see myself leaving. Being strong enough to go back to the one place where I wanted to be. Thanks again. She was on her feet in one nimble move, and then she was running away, ghosting across the snow so quickly that her feet had no time to sink into the snow. She left no prints behind her. She didn't look back. My rejection bothered her more than she let on before, even in her thoughts. She wouldn't want to see me again before I left. My mouth twisted with chagrin. I didn't like hurting Tanya, though her feelings were not deep, hardly pure, and, in any case, not something I could return. It still made me feel less than a gentleman. I put my chin on my knees and stared up at the stars again, though I was suddenly anxious to be on my way. I knew that Alice would see me coming home, that she would tell the others. This would make them happy, Carlyle and Esme especially. But I gazed at the stars for one more moment, trying to see past the face in my head. Between me and the brilliant lights in the sky, a pair of bewildered chocolate-brown eyes stared back at me, seeming to ask what this decision would mean for her. Of course. I couldn't be sure if that was really the information her curious eyes sought. Even in my imagination, I couldn't hear her thoughts. Bella Swan's eyes continued to question, and an unobstructed view of the stars continued to elude me. With a heavy sigh, I gave up, and got to my feet. If I ran, I would be back to Carlyle's car in less than an hour. In a hurry to see my family and wanting very much to be the Edward that faced things head-on, I raced across the starlit snowfield. Leaving no footprints. It's going to be okay. Alice breathed. Her eyes were unfocused, and Jasper had one hand lightly under her elbow, guiding her forward as we walked into the rundown cafeteria in a close group. Rosalie and Emmett led the way. Emmett looking ridiculously. 2008 Stephanie Meyer, 27. 28, like a bodyguard in the middle of hostile territory. Rose looked wary, too, but much more irritated than protective. Of course it is. I grumbled. Their behavior was ludicrous. If I wasn't positive that I could handle this moment, I would have stayed home. The sudden shift from our normal, even playful morning, it had snowed in the night, and Emmett and Jasper were not above taking advantage of my distraction to bombard me with slushballs. When they got bored with my lack of response, they turned on each other. To this overdone vigilance would have been comical if it weren't so irritating. She's not here yet, but the way she's going to come in. She won't be downwind if we sit in our regular spot. Of course we'll sit in our regular spot. Stop it, Alice. You getting on my nerves. I'll be absolutely fine. She blinked once as Jasper helped her into her seat, and her eyes finally focused on my face. She said, sounding surprised. I think you're right, of course I am. I muttered. I hated being the focus of their concern. I felt a sudden sympathy for Jasper, remembering all the times we hovered protectively over him. He met my glance briefly, and grinned. Annoying, isn't it? I grimaced at him. Was it just last week that this long, drab room had seemed so killingly dull to me? That it had seemed almost like sleep, like a coma, to be here? Today my nerves were stretched tight piano wires, tense to sing at the lightest pressure. My senses were hyper-alert. I scanned every sound, every sight, every movement of the air that touched my skin, every thought. Especially the thoughts. There was only one sense that I kept locked down, refused to use. Smell, of course. I didn't breathe. I was expecting to hear more about the Cullens in the thoughts that I sifted through. All day I'd been waiting, searching for whichever new acquaintance Bella, 2008 Stephanie Meyer, Swan might have confided in. Trying to see the direction the new gossip would take. But there was nothing. No one noticed the 5 vampires in the cafeteria. Just the same as before the new girl had come. Several of the humans here were still thinking of that girl, still thinking the same thoughts from last week. Instead of finding this unutterably boring, I was now fascinated. Had she said nothing to anyone about me? There was no way that she had not noticed my black, murderous glare. I had seen her react to it. Surely, I'd scared her silly. I had been convinced that she would have mentioned it to someone, maybe even exaggerated the story a bit to make it better. Given me a few menacing lines. And then, she'd also heard me trying to get out of our shared biology class. She must have wondered, after seeing my expression, whether she were the cause. A normal girl would have asked around, compared her experience to others, looked for common ground that would explain my behavior so she didn't feel singled out. Humans were constantly desperate to feel normal, to fit in. To blend in with everyone else around them, like a featureless flock of sheep. The need was particularly strong during the insecure adolescent years. This girl would be no exception to that rule. But no one at all took any notice of us sitting here, at our normal table. Bella must be exceptionally shy, if she confided in no one. Perhaps she had spoken to her father, maybe that was the strongest relationship. Though that seemed unlikely, given the fact that she had spent so little time with him throughout her life. She would be closer to her mother. Still, I would have to pass by Chief Swan sometime soon and listen to what he was thinking. Anything new? Jasper asked. Nothing. She must not have said anything. All of them raised an eyebrow at this news. Maybe you're not as scary as you think you are. Emmett said, chuckling. I bet. I could have frightened her better than that. I rolled my eyes at him. Wonder why. He puzzled again over my revelation about the girl's unique silence. 2008 Stephanie Meyer, 29. 30. We've been over that. I don't know, she's coming in. Alice murmured then. I felt my body go rigid. Try to look human, you say? Emmett asked. He held up his right fist, twisting his fingers to reveal the snowball he saved in his palm. Of course it had not melted there. He squeezed it into a lumpy block of ice. He had his eyes on Jasper, but I saw the direction of his thoughts. So did Alice, of course. When he abruptly hurled the ice chunk at her, she flicked it away with a casual flutter of her fingers. The ice ricocheted across the length of the cafeteria, too fast to be visible to human eyes.